it's always a loaded question when somebody asks, are you ready for Ramadan? I feel like for me, whenever I'm asked that question, if I'm being honest with myself, the answer is sometimes no, I'm not ready, and I'm actually nervous about Ramadan. And I think the reason for that nervousness oftentimes is, number one, just the fear that you're not gonna give it its right, you're not gonna do right by the opportunity. But two, also just the amount of change that it represents in the things that you've grown accustomed to throughout the year in terms of your eating and your sleeping and just your schedule more generally, right? You're worried about the difficulty it might represent by changing all of those things. And I think what that speaks to more deeply is just this tension and this battle between two parts of what make us who we are, which is our nafs, like our lower desires, and in our ruh, which is our soul. And those two things competing with one another, and in us maybe being accustomed to giving the nafs what it wants. When it's hungry, we feed it. When it's tired, we give it rest. When it wants leisure and luxury, we accommodate it. And the nafs gets so used to being coddled in that way that when it starts reflecting on this idea of being held back, it starts getting antsy. Whereas the ruh is like this kind of more subtle, more shy, if you will, part of ourselves that is really at the core of who we are, and it desires something deeper. And so that same nervousness throughout the month of Ramadan, by the end of it, it changes, and now we become nervous of Ramadan leaving, and we become worried about, what might happen after it's over, right? In that way, you see the transition between a person's nafs being then relegated to the desires and the instruction of its soul, right? And by fasting, we give our soul room to speak, room to breathe, right? Room to tell us, and for us to actually listen to what it really wants. And we realize that the nafs at times was distracting, or maybe a little bit, overemphasized. So that's what Ramadan represents, and by the end of it, we're just as worried about it leaving.